So certain things like this, I see enough common mistakes here that there are parentheses here. It doesn't mean automatically you multiply. Here you multiply, here you're combining like terms. This says, though, that you want to subtract or distribute a negative, change the sign of everything here. So if I change that to a plus, then that means I'm changing that and that to a plus as well. Not that everything becomes positive, but a negative in front of a set of parentheses means you need to change the sign of everything inside. And so if everything was negative, that negative turned everything positive. Now it's just a combine like terms thing, like a -4 and a +1, that's a -3. A -1i and a +3i, well, that's a +2i, and that's it. You don't have to multiply. Here you do multiply. Here it's FOIL. You got a +4, and then your outer and your inner and your last. The outer is a positive 12i. The inner is a +1i. And last is a positive 3i squared, but keep in mind I squared is a -1. So that really means -3. So your like terms are the 4 and the -3, that's a total of 1, and a 12i and a 1i, well, that's a 13i, and that's what we're looking at there. This guy down, and this, I squared, same thing. You got a 9i squared, +9, but all that times a -i. You got to keep track of the fact that I squared is actually a -1. So wipes this out, but makes that negative, okay? Because it's a negative, so let me do it this way. It's -i times 9 times a -1, because that I squared is a -1. So the negative times the negative makes it positive. You end up with just a 9 and then an I, and it's positive because the negatives cancel each other out. You go down to something like this, you want to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So you've got a 2 plus I and a 2 minus 4i. Well, the only way you're going to get rid of an I is to multiply by the conjugate. We spent some time showing why that's the case. We just need to somehow conjure up that it is the case at this time of year, because you want to make sure you're reminding yourself that what happens here. Let's do that first. Your first term is going to be a 4. Now your outer and your inner term is where the magic happens. The outer term is an 8i, the inner term is a -8i, so they cancel out. They're gone. If you want to, write them in to visually confirm that you have the same thing, but a plus on the outside and a minus on the inside. Then the last, you have this -16i squared. Keep in mind that I squared is a -1, so that makes this a +16. So the whole shooting match on the bottom is just a big old fat 20. All right? So you had your 4, these guys cancel, the +16, there's that. So you still have to FOIL the top. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4i, that's a +8i. So far it's starting the same, but then you got your inner here is a +2i, and then your last is a +4i squared, which really means -4. So those guys are actually going to cancel each other out. So all we're left with on top is this 10i. That reduces. The zeros cancel, you end up with an I over 2 or a 1/2 I. Either way, that's fine. Okay. Well, you know what? While we're at it in the I section here, you combine these together, change the sign, change the sign, change the sign. That's a -4, that's a -1. I and I is a 2i. So what do we do with that? Well, here's our real axis and here's our imaginary axis. Doesn't mean it's a fake axis. That just means it's where we graph the i's. So -1 is on the real axis, so that's a back one, and then +2i means we're going to go up 2. So that right there is your A. And so some of them you have to kind of simplify, and here FOIL 3 plus I. You got your 9 plus 3i plus 3i plus I squared, which is really a -1. So that leaves us with an 8 plus 6i. Well, that's hard. 8's way over here and 6i is way up there, so it's going to be out there somewhere. That's B. All right, that wasn't too helpful. Well, not helpful. It's just off the grid. It's over 8 and up 6, right? A -I cubed is going to be a positive I, so you have 4i times I, because a -I cubed is going to be a negative I. Trust me. 4i squared is equal to -4, so that just means 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot there. There's a C. I'm going to let you, well, shoot, yeah. Change the signs, add. The i's cancel out. You have a 5 minus 2. That's a positive 3. There's your d right there. I to the 18th. 18, this pattern recycles every 4. So 18 is not divisible by 4, but it's divisible by 2. So if it was divisible by 4, we'd say it's equal to 1, because at the end of every cycle, I to the 4th power equals 1. I to the 1st is I to the 2nd is negative 1, I to the 3rd is negative I, and we talked about negative I cubed. It's a negative I, but the negative was already there, so that's why it became a positive, and then I to the 4th is equal to a positive 1. So as you go through, if you divide your power by 4, it goes into 16 evenly with a remainder of 2. If you can say, I understand that it's going to have a remainder somewhere between 0 and 3, because if there is no remainder, that remainder is the equivalent of saying, well, I to the 18th is the same thing as I squared, which is equal to a negative 1.